Hello, I'm Connor McReynolds, and this is The Dinner Party. In each episode of this podcast, I ask a fantastic guest to describe their dream dinner party. I'll be finding out where in the world they would host their dinner party, who they would invite, and what they would cook for their guests. This week, I'm speaking to the extraordinary Francesca Forristal. Francesca is a writer, a performer, an improviser, an actor, singer, and perhaps most brilliantly of all, she's a drag king who performs musical comedy as one half of the Drag Prov Review under the name of Christian Adore. She's one of those creative people who can do pretty much anything. She's amazing. I'm super excited to hear all about the people that inspire Cheska most. So without further ado, here is the brilliant Francesca Forristal. Francesca, hello. Thank you so much for joining me on the dinner party.
Oh, hello there.
Hello, how are you?
I am very good.
Good. That sounded like a very considered answer as well.
Well, no, I like to check in with myself every time someone asks me that. I like to, I like to think that even people who are just asking it for small talk reasons and they don't know how I am, they're going to get a really reasoned kind of checking in with myself to check if I'm okay.
Oh, well, I'm very pleased to hear you are okay. You have been, by the signs of things, very busy recently with lots of fun, creative things.
Yes, I have.
This is very exciting.
It's good.
Without revealing any of the specifics of projects you're working on, has it been lots of fun writing things?
Yes, that is my primary kind of thing at the moment. I guess it's obviously with theatres being stymied by the virus sweeping the nation, nay, the world. It's actually been a really useful time because all of the projects I'd normally have to go, well, I don't know, because I'm doing this or that or the other.
Yeah.
Really dig my teeth into.
And so, I mean, at the moment it's writing, as you've said, in normal times, you're involved with so many different things. I mean, obviously performing alongside writing. When did you kind of first... Have you always wanted to be writing and performing, or was this something that kind of came to you a bit later on? What's your kind of history with your writing and performing?
Well, I mean, I've always been a massive show off. So there is I've always loved performing. I've always loved acting and stuff like that at school. I always liked dressing up. My mum, when she found out I was a drag king later, she was like, yeah, that makes sense. You used to stuff socks down your pants. So,
Wow.
Doesn't come as a surprise to me.
I'm assuming you were a fan of Labyrinth. That's
very much. But like it was, I don't know. At school, actually, I was a proper geek, like really, really geeky. And I always really enjoyed sciences and maths because you could get 100% in them. You could like fully like, whereas with my English teacher, I'm very heavily dyslexic and she would take the mickey out of me all the time because I couldn't read fluently.
right.
And I couldn't spell. And so I used to stumble and stutter over my words. And if we were doing, a cold read of scripts or whatever, I couldn't act when I was reading for scripts for the first time because again, I'd like stumble over it and like.
Yeah.
So it was one of those things where science was always naturally where I excelled. But loved English, loved creative writing, read a story that I'd wrote in year 7 the other day because I was kind of sorting through stuff. And it was Mon Chevalier, which is a very pretentious title for my knight. And it's a take on La Belle Sans Merci from a kind of feminist perspective where she spikes his drink and then the light slowly drain from his eyes before going into a cave, pulling down his trousers and then leaving him there.
That is an extraordinary story for someone in was it year 7, you said?
Yeah, so that's 13 years old. I was really, really angry feminist at a very young age. And then when I was doing my when I was applying for a different sixth form, I got really ill, and I ended up spending a lot of time in hospital. And when I was in hospital, I read a lot. I read
Hmm.
Midnight's Children by Salman Rushdie and God of Small Things by Arundhati Roy, and
Wow.
all of these books. I read Hedda Gabler, and I was like, wow, she's messed up. And I suddenly realised that I was wasting my time studying sciences because I loved English. So I emailed very politely the school that had just accepted me on a scholarship for a load of sciences
No
and went,
way.
hi, can I completely change everything? And they were like, right, yeah, fine. And I've
Oh
never looked back.
wow. That's amazing. And so that was your kind of beginning with writing. Was that from that point what you kind of thought you wanted to do then? Sort
No,
of
I went through a phase of thinking I wanted to be an actor, and then I realised that I didn't really like rehearsing plays very much.
yeah.
So that
Well,
probably,
what was it about that? Because that's very interesting to me. Because I had the exact same experience.
yeah.
All I ever wanted to be from the age of 4 until the age of 18. I was so focused on I'm going to be an actor. There was never any doubt. And then when I got to the age of 18, it all kind of changed. But what was it about rehearsing plays and that kind of thing that you find you didn't enjoy?
Um, I did it once, and then I was like, "Well, we've done that bit now. Can we
Right.
not
Yeah. Yeah.
want to come back to it? I know my lines. I've done that bit. Can we get to the next bit?"
Yeah.
Or I'd want to like do it differently. And so that's why kind of when I got to uni, but I'd never done any comedy. That was crucially. I'm very good at making myself cry on cue, so I just got cast as kind of sad
right.
women, um, sad, tragic women who cry about mainly men. And then Eponine from Les Mis. And then um, got to uni, and by complete fluke, got into an improv company called the Oxford Imps, and spent the first, I think, term of my uni career thinking, well, this is all very well and good being in a comedy troupe, except for the fact that I can't speak on stage without having a small panic attack, and I'm not,
yeah.
and it's going really badly. Um, curse me for thinking I could do things. Slowly it got better ish, and
yeah.
now I'm we're moving forward.
You're being very modest there because it didn't just begin to get better. I mean, you really excelled and at the Imps, which is such a great grounding for so many kind of really established comics. And that is where you met your kind of comedy partner in crime,
Ah,
Ed,
that's
and
Crimmins.
you formed the Drag Prov Review. You mentioned earlier that you are a drag king. For
Yes.
anybody who's listening who doesn't have the pleasure of knowing what a drag king is, could you introduce us a little bit to that?
Yes, of course. A drag king is someone who plays with elements of heightened masculine coding features. Like, okay, I'm making this sound overly academic. Mainly, it's people who play up dressing like blokes. But the problem with that definition is that can be really trans exclusionary. Like,
Hmm.
anyone, regardless of gender, can play with masculine aesthetics,
Hmm.
voices, styles of performance. It's basically about questioning at its heart what masculinity is. It's drag, so it's big, it's glittery, it's can be a whole host of different things. And I often say that saying you like drag is kind of like saying you like theatre or you like movies. It's like great, you like movies, but Susan
Hmm.
like horror and Derek's gonna like rom-coms, and
Yeah.
you
Yeah.
can like some drag kings who dress up and look very much like a bloke from Essex, and then you can also get drag kings who are like Dorian Electra, who you're not quite sure whether they're a man, woman, or small neon alien.
it's really interesting. I mean, I'm really fascinated by it. By the kind of culture around it. It's not something that I've ever dabbled in myself, and I don't fully understand the politics around, whether kind of a straight man can kind of immerse themselves in drag or anything. But the question about gender and everything is so fascinating. Have you learned anything about yourself, kind of even taking gender out of the equation by being your drag king persona, Christian Adore? Have you learned anything about yourself as a person through performing that character?
Massively. Like, I started drag at a time where I was really not like femme phobic, because, like, I love women. My girl is organs. Certainly with myself, there were certain things about, in order to kind of set myself aside from straight girls, I had to be
Hmm.
like repressed, because that's what the opposite of women's is, which is men's, and they are repressed and strong and don't wear pink. And actually, being Christian Adore, who's my drag king persona, who loves, sequin jackets and has very effeminate makeup and long hair and is
Mm.
a theatre dandy, and in many ways is more in touch with his feminine side than I was at the time. Um,
Hmm.
Suddenly kind of made me go, okay, this is absolute rubbish that I'm kind of walking around here coding certain behaviors as male or female. Being sensitive is fine, enjoying all hosts, painting with all the colors as opposed to painting in monochrome, because you're only limiting yourself to half the palette. Like, and
Mm.
I really, really started feeling more comfortable being a bit.
That's amazing. That's so brilliant. I again, it's an area, when I'm talking about mental health stuff, I do quite a bit of stuff with the Movember charity,
Mm,
and speaking to men about, yeah, about kind of those gender stereotypes, the idea that men have to be strong and silent and not in touch with their emotions and all that stuff that you were talking about. I think it would do all men the world of good to hear what you're saying about that. And do you think it would be good for everyone to? It's maybe a bit of a leading question, but the idea that I'm getting is that everyone should try drag.
oh, dude, yes. So I did a series of workshops with Andrew and Eve, who are an awesome queer company up in the north, and
Yeah.
we, organised a lot of social events. Uh, there were, solid, I'd say, 60 people in the Zoom chat
Uh
every
huh.
week, trying
Wow.
uh, developing a drag character specifically, not just, sticking on either a wig or a moustache or whatever and going it's drag, but kind of really making a drag character that you
Mm-hmm.
knew and that you could inhabit for a while and play with. And it's just writing by another guys at that point, in the same way that a lot
Yeah.
of people write a character and then start doing dialogue. All you're doing is just creating a character that you could write endless dialogue for, because you know them so well that you can speak.
Yeah. Yeah.
And people who were questioning their gender identity, trans men were really loving it, because it was kind of exploring new elements of their masculinity they hadn't thought about before. You had people who were really scared of performing who were trying it and were developing their confidence. You had people who were, just wanted to be silly for a bit and like not take the gender thing so seriously.
Mm. That
Everyone
sounds
kind of,
brilliant. That sounds really good. You talk about developing that persona, and kind of getting to know a character so well. How much of Cheska do you bring into Christian Adore, or are they kind of completely separate identities and entities? For kind of, I guess, maybe for self-preservation reasons, it might be good to have a divide between them. But how much of yourself do you kind of find yourself naturally bringing into Christian?
I think Christian is the self that it's certain parts of myself on crack. Um, in the same way that every character I write has certain facets of my personality on crack, and then put in different situations, in different skins, and seeing how those parts of myself would react to things like. And I'd say that Christian Adore is the all the like parts of me that love people telling me I've done a good job. He's just Christian can ask unashamedly and unabashedly for applause and validation in a way which I wish
Oh
I
my
always
God, that sounds marvelous.
It's beautiful. And he's also, I'd say, or my girlfriend would say, he's the part of me that kind of really turns up to dates. You know, like
Oh yeah.
trying to be dashing when I'm trying to be like, but then I'll like fall over and like drop everything out. I'll never forget her being like, "Ah, I don't know how you do that," and I, swing my coat on my back and be like, I don't know, babe, I'm just really smooth, and then everything fell out the pockets. Um, that is the epitome of Christian Adore. He will turn
That's
up
fantastic.
somewhere. Just yeah.
You've written some amazing articles on kind of drag culture.
Mm.
And I was really interested in one that I was reading earlier where you touched on the subject of how drag kings are arguably kind of sidelined in drag culture and the irony of the culture kind of putting queens at the forefront, even though they're sort of maybe assigned male at birth. And,
Yep.
typically kings might be assigned female at birth and they're kind of sidelined in that culture. Do you think that is changing in drag culture, or do you think there's still a long way to go before they're kind of seen in the same light?
Oh, I want to say it's changing. I mean, look, everything. I am a boundless optimist. I will. I definitely think it is moving in the right direction. I would say that COVID hasn't been a particularly shining time for the drag community in terms of its inclusion of kings, because as has happened with theatre as well, and indeed I'm sure every industry, when times get tough, people go back to the most commercially viable.
Mm.
We're
Hmm.
definitely sure this is going to sell. Let's get Ian McKellen playing, a teenage Shakespeare character. It's if Hamlet is 80, how old are his parents? That,
It's kind of
uh,
like the opposite of a Russian doll situation. It doesn't bear thinking about.
but I do think it's going in the right direction. Things that are less RuPaul centric will help. I think that even like Canada's Drag Race is being more inclusionary, and
Mm.
we're seeing some movement towards including kings more in commercial ventures, although not really. And I would urge people to do more.
Yeah,
But
absolutely.
this
It,
is my
I,
thing.
I I know what you mean about how queens are kind of put at the forefront and that kind of thing. And you mention that the culture or what's commercially viable in the culture might be seen as kind of RuPaul centric. Do you think on a grander scale of kind of across the spectrum of drag, has stuff like RuPaul been generally positive for the movement, or is it kind of damaging in some way that isn't obvious to someone like me?
I feel like any movement into the mainstream comes with a cost. I think in this case, as with every kind of, I wouldn't go as far as to say cultural appropriation, but every
Mm.
kind of appropriation of a subculture into mainstream culture requires the dilution of the things which make it gritty and real. I think that there are lots of 13-year-olds who will now feel more comfortable exploring their gender and drag, and
Mhm.
will smile and wave at a drag queen if they see them, or rather than going ew gross, that's a
Yeah, yeah.
dress, so like, oh my gosh, yes, the queer community's massively benefited from RuPaul making something as subculture as drag mainstream. I'm not embarrassed to say I'm a drag king. However,
Mm.
it also means that you get 13-year-olds running around going, "Yes, Queen Slay! Oh my God, work!" Um, on pictures of another white blonde girl wearing a sparkly dress and going, "Queens!" Which
Yeah, yeah.
you, but completely eschews the fact that these words come from AAVE, so African American vernacular, and kind of forgets that drag came from like ballroom culture, which is predominantly like African American communities and like Latinx communities.
Hmm.
And now we're getting lots of white queens booked, and the black women and men who started this, and people of neither gender kind of starting this movement, are now like not the ones benefiting from it commercially. So
Yeah, yeah.
about remembering whenever you say "Yas Queen work" that you're invoking a very rich history.
Yeah, God, it's so interesting. Yeah, I mean, I don't know a huge amount about it, but just hearing you talk about it makes me want to go away and learn more. It's really fascinating. There's so much I want to talk to you about, Cheska. Because aside from uh, the amazing work you do as part of the Drag Prov Review and your Drag King work, you also we mentioned earlier that you're busy writing things. You write new musicals as part of Forrestal and Clark. You've been developing your first couple of shows as part of that. I mean, you're just involved with so much really amazing stuff. I'm
Thanks.
always interested in asking creative people about their kind of creative sort of bucket lists, for want of a better term. Is there anything, given that you've done so much really cool creative stuff, is there something that you've been thinking for a long time? God, I'd really love to try that, but you haven't got around to doing it yet.
Um, yeah, definitely. I mean, so in the lockdown period, the main writing that I've been doing has been through my screenwriting agent. So, kind of doing stuff for screen, which has been really
Wow.
exciting as a kind of career progression, I guess.
Yeah.
Come with a lot of learning curves. And I think that my creative bucket list would have to be combining my love of what music and musicals can do as a form of storytelling,
Hmm.
and just a medium that really excites me. Equally, in Drag Prov, I improvise musicals, that's my thing. And then bringing that to my screenwriting, I think. But that will require me to have quite a few more credits on things
Sure.
for other people's before.
Well, you're at a very exciting stage of your career because you've got all this ahead of you. It's so exciting. I mean,
Yeah.
I come from a publishing background, and I was reading all your articles earlier and watching videos of your clips from your musicals and your brilliant drag pro stuff. And I mean, I it just kind of hits me in the face that you would be such an amazing novelist. That I think some of the stuff that your musicals and stuff touch on, uh, I think there's so much about you that would make a great novelist. That I mean, you've clearly got stories to tell. I think your experiences would really appeal, probably particularly to kind of young readers. I could really see as a kind of a YA author. YA went through a period where that might have been an offensive thing to say to someone, but I think
Yeah, I
the
love
whole
it.
perception about it, it's really become like or seen as properly legitimate stuff. I think you're a very marketable author as well. I mean, I probably should have said this to you off the podcast, but I
Yeah.
implore you to write a YA novel, and I think it would be huge. I think it would be amazing. But
Wow.
yes, I'm kind of gushing now. I think you're
No,
such an
like
amazing creative talent.
I really appreciate that. And actually, I mean, I was a teacher for a year.
Oh
Um,
yeah.
yeah, Christchurch in Oxford,
Oh
and
wow.
it was when I was kind of starting doing drag stuff. I wasn't really sure what I wanted to do writing wise, and I love YA because I had to read all the blooming YA so that I could give it to the kids.
Yeah, of course. Yeah.
Really sparky, like you want to give them stuff which is gonna get their blood pumping and get them excited about literature.
Yeah. Yeah.
I love writing prose. I think it's something which I definitely want to try and is definitely on my creative bucket list.
Excellent. I feel like I've said my piece now. Hopefully, I've pushed you in a direction, and I can feel like I can sit back knowing that I've done what I can to get your YA book written. I think it's because it's such an interesting time in publishing. I mean, particularly in kind of YA publishing. I mean, when I was growing up, there would have been very, very little, um, particularly for kind of gay youth. There wasn't enough written. Those voices weren't being given a platform and an opportunity.
Mm,
And a lot of publishers now are kind of looking at not just in kind of terms of sexuality, but in terms of gender and in terms of uh, ethnicity and kind of people from all different cultural backgrounds. You know, even class, like working class authors weren't being given a platform. And there's so much being done now to amplify those voices and to try to redress that imbalance. And it's a really exciting time for young readers who previously weren't seeing their stories being told. And I think that you have, I mean, I wish we had time to go into things like your, the story behind your what sounds like an incredibly exciting first show. P.S. I'm a terrible person. I can't bring that up and not ask you about it. That would be very unfair to listeners. Can you tell us kind of what the story behind P.S. I'm a terrible person is, which is such a great title for a show as well.
Thank you. P.S. I'm a terrible person is the title partially because when the first ever meeting I had about it, uh, I recorded with my writing partner, kind of for reference purposes, so we didn't have to write a load of stuff down. And when we listened back to the recording, we realised that I said it, I think, maybe 10 times. Trying to explain this story. Look, okay, and the next thing that happened, look, I mean, I did this, but I'm a terrible person, so it's but, I think at its core, it's a musical about addiction. The addiction happens to be an eating disorder, but
Mhm.
anyone watching it should be able to access the experience uh, through either knowing someone who has an addictive relationship with something, or
Mhm.
it's like the glass of wine at the end of the day, or the scrolling, and you should stop, and you're there an hour later, etc., etc.
Mhm.
And I guess it's exploring the idea that the worst parts of ourselves are also the best parts of ourselves. So the central character Martha, um, who is not me and is not my life, but
Sure.
has Rachel Bloom in Crazy Ex-Girlfriend talks about an emotional autobiography. I
Oh.
He has written Crazy Ex-Girlfriend not because she is the crazy ex-girlfriend. She isn't the main character, but she does know the emotional arc from her own experience, and it's helped her write it. And so it's an emotional autobiography. Similarly, I'd say PS is an emotional autobiography for me. I had an eating disorder, uh, confession.
Mm.
These things never. It's not as clear cut as like you recover or you don't recover. Like recovery is a thing that you choose every day, in the same way that alcoholics are
Yeah.
alcoholics for
Yeah.
life.
Absolutely.
You choose every day to make it right. Yeah, you make good decisions today. Uh,
Yeah. Yeah.
it's about a 16-year-old. We follow her through to when she's 19. She develops an eating disorder because she's obsessive and loves really, really, really intense sensations and is really controlling. And all of those things lead to her getting really addicted to throwing up, because actually it releases endorphins, same ones you get from exercise or chocolate or sex. And then she starts not eating because she gets that same high. And it's about her chasing that high and the costs of that high, basically, throughout, based on her family, her friends.
Yeah. Wow. It sounds like an incredible project to take on to be a part of.
But it's funny. Crucially, it's funny. It's not going to be sad. Promise.
Yes. Yeah. I mean the clip I saw, the song that you sang earlier. It's Martha's mum.
Oh,
The song.
that one is sad.
Oh, I mean, Christ, it's an amazing piece of music. So that's all I can judge the musical on that and what you've just said, and I really can't wait to see it.
Is Jordan Clark, so he's my co-writer, co-conspirator in that regard.
Oh, yeah, the music was phenomenal. Your performance was incredible. It sounds like such an exciting project. Um, Jessica, I we're now so far into this episode, and I haven't asked you a single thing about your dream dinner party. I'm failing as a host, so I have to ask you before we get into the specifics and learn about kind of where you would be, what you'd be cooking, who would be there. I need to ask you about your general vibe of your dinner party. What kind of tone are you hoping to strike? Is it going to be a sort of relaxing evening fueled by interesting conversation, or is it going to be a bit of a livelier, more raucous affair?
I think based on the people that I've invited,
I think the choice has been taken out of your hands by
I
those who
don't
you've
know
invited.
anymore. I mean, look, I would not wish it any other way. The night is going to be a blooming mental night. It's going to be, there's going to
I
be
I
scandal.
definitely think it will be. Well, where would you be hosting it? I mean, you've got the choice of anywhere in the world you can gather these people together. Where do you want that to be?
Right. Oh gosh, I'm really undecided. Okay, so either the Royal Albert Hall, they have a function room off to the side of it, which is really beautiful. I know
Oh,
this
wow.
because, and it's got a kitchen attached to it. I know this because I was for a very short period of my life a silver service waitress.
Oh,
I,
wow.
I did get fired from this job very quickly because when I was at the Royal Albert Hall in said function room, which is very beautiful, ornate, and would very much impress my guests, and they think I was a wonderful person. There'll be opera in the background. I'd be very sophisticated, etc. With the
Absolutely.
kitchen, etc. But when I got moved from serving the tables to working in the kitchen because I was rude, and then my supervisor would come in and be like, "Right, have you cooked these nuggets, these posh chicken nuggets?" And I was like, "No, they're working on frozen. It's going to take a while." And then he went away and he came back literally 2 minutes later and was like, "Are they done yet?" I was like, "No, they're from frozen. It's going to take a while." And he came back a third time and said, "Are they done yet?" And I just went, "I don't know. You tell me." And I took one and I threw it at him. And then I was
Oh, wow. That
so
is a great reason to be fired from a job.
I think I'm going to go back there victorious
Yes!
for the
With
party.
all of these incredible people and just be like, screw you. I
Yeah,
write my own story. That's a very good place to host.
thank
And
you.
also, as you say, just super exciting walking into the Royal Albert Hall. And I
Exactly.
think, judging from who you're inviting, I think all of these people would respond very well to such a big, grand, exciting performance space. Well, speaking of your guests, your first guest, we spoke earlier about your life on stage as Christian Adore, so it's perhaps no surprise that your first guest at your dream dinner party is your comedy partner in crime, the fabulous Eton Mess.
Yes. I fear that no dinner party is complete without an eaten mess. And she is wonderful. And and she's just effervescent. She's witty. She can put people down if they're misbehaving, and the people on this list will misbehave. So I need someone else to help me with just sheer crowd control, really.
I
Uh,
think,
and she is
yes.
the love of my life. So, you know,
And we must be clear at this stage that you're inviting Eton Mess, not Ed, who I understand is an absolute nightmare at dinner parties.
yeah, he is. He's a liability really to himself and others.
Absolutely, yes. Much safer ground with Eton Mess.
Yeah.
What I mean, are you hoping that perhaps Eton and yourself might provide a little kind of post dinner entertainment? I suspect, given that your guests are there might be some competition for who's doing the
Oh my God,
post dinner entertainment.
I have like no idea. So when we get to it, we'll get to it, yeah. But like fully, there's going to be some competition in like, especially improv, rap, and comedy. So there is one person on this list who would give me a run for my money.
And what kind of behavior you say that eating might help you kind of controlling your slightly wild guests,
Mm.
but left to your own devices, how do you think Eton would behave at a dinner party?
She would sit at the head of the table, or near as the most influential man on the table, to drink and eat everything that was available to her, and then demand more.
She
Uh,
sounds like my kind of woman. I like this.
yeah, it's like she just has a hollow body when it comes to food.
Yes, one of those people who can eat a lot and has an infuriatingly good figure.
Yes, well, the corset helps, but you know. So,
How long have you and Eton been performing together?
oh my God, you're gonna make me feel. Ah, no, not old. Um, we've been forming together since I was 19, so 5 years.
Wow, five
We
years. That's a long relationship to have with someone, 5 years.
haven't broken up. It's the longest relationship I've ever had. So, and she's maybe not in one. So,
Is it still exciting, kind of being with Eton? I mean, do you guys? Is there any element of sort of becoming it ever becoming kind of safe and comfortable, or are you constantly switching things up and changing things and trying different things to keep your relationship together very exciting?
I think artistically, I well at the moment, I could cry actually. The lack of performing with Eton at the moment
Mm.
is really taking its toll, because I spend my entire life doing creative things. My entire livelihood, my paycheck, my rent, everything is generating material for stage, for screen, whatever. But
Hmm.
only part of it that never feels like work ever is drag prof, is that kind of
Yeah.
improv thing. And I think the way we never get bored of it is because no two shows are ever the same. And occasionally you find yourself resting on your laurels and not pushing yourself, but mainly I'd say sheerly the fact that we never even arrive at the venue long enough to warm up. The fact that, for the past 2 years she's lived in Oxford and I've lived here is
Yeah.
we've, had to keep communicating and communicating. That's a really weird way of stressing that word. Etc. Yeah, you've got to keep shaking it up. But I think the sheer fact that neither of us like planning anything ever, we arrive at a gig and go, right, hey, what are we doing? Like, that alone is pretty on our toes.
That is very exciting, and that is certainly one way to keep things very fresh. Eton Mess, a terrific first guest to kickstart your dinner party. Your second guest is someone who I didn't really know anything about until today. Having read about him, he sounds like he's a bit of a prankster, so perhaps a little bit of a wild card at a dinner party full of wild cards. You're inviting the poet John Skelton.
Yes.
Tell me about John Skelton. This is a very interesting choice to me.
He is he will let you know himself from everything he ever writes that he was the poet laureate a very long time ago, 1500s. I became really obsessed with him when I was in university because I was an improviser, and I found out that the way he composed his poetry was through improvising. He was a courtly poet in the 1500s who was completely obsessed with himself. Uh, he wrote some scandalous poems. Uh,
Yeah,
he was a bit of a diva, and he
brilliant.
invented his own verse form. So at the time, the 1500s, small English lesson, but I promise you it'll be quick. In 1500, verse forms are really important. So we've come out of the world of Chaucer, and we're about to dive into the world of sonnets and passing around sonnets in courts, which leads to things like, obviously, Shakespeare's sonnets, blah blah blah.
Mm-hmm.
But in this period, the main function of poetry was in courts, like to entertain the king and his entourage,
Mm-hmm.
and writing in certain verse forms was really important. And John Skelton went, "Nope, not for me. I'm going to make my own." And I don't know now. And he invented the Skeltonic, which was essentially just really short lines of like 2 or 3 words, maybe 4, that all rhymed. So he'd like just rhyme on a word for like 8 lines,
Yeah.
and
I listened to a little bit in advance of this. Oh, it was a poem about a lady whose name I've forgotten.
Eleanor
Eleanor's.
Rummy. Yeah,
Yes, and I listened to the first part of that, and it was very, very funny. Even though it's written in a not very modern form of English, so I wasn't getting everything. But it's the form itself, like you say, so rhyming, short lines, really, really witty.
yeah. He's super super funny, and a bit bawdy and a bit silly, and he really was just. I can't stress to you how up himself he was. He thought he was so that he in certain poems, I believe it's a revelation, he he writes things like, the answer to this poem will be solved if you can solve this riddle, and there's like a maths equation in this poem that he's put in, and you solve the maths equation and it's his name, and or like at the periodically in his poems he'll just be like John Skelton, the poet laureate, need I remind you, and then move on. Or like often, for people to write these dream poems where the poet would go up to the skies and they'd receive information from all the greats that had gone before him. So Chaucer would go up and see Gower and all these other poets that they loved, and they'd learn things, and it would be kind of like their coming of age story. So John Skelton wrote his, and he goes up to the sky and just writes all of the literary greats telling him that he's really clever. And so there's this whole dialogue with Chaucer where he's like, "Hey mate, hey Chaucer, how's it going?" And Chaucer's like, "Oh my god, it's John Skelton. Mate, you're a legend." And John Skelton's like, "No, no, I'm not. I." And Chaucer's like, "No, really, you're very good."
He sounds wild.
He's a
He sounds
wanker.
absolutely fantastic. I mean, he sounds like he lived a bit of a crazy life as well. You mentioned that he wrote some fairly kind of scandalous poems. There was a 2 year period where he was imprisoned, but
Yes,
the reason for that isn't very clear. But then he wrote a satirical piece about Cardinal Wolsey,
yes.
after which he had to claim sanctuary in Westminster Abbey to avoid arrest, and he had
Mm.
to remain there until he died.
Yeah, so this is the thing. If you go into this is really old. It isn't, because I'm a bit of a geek, right? As I mentioned before, go back far enough. There are just rules. Oh wait, it's in the Hunchback of Notre Dame, so everyone gets this, right? You go into a church or a cathedral or whatever, you can claim sanctuary and people can't arrest you. It's just like the end of loads of people's kind of naughty times. Is them just being like, "Quick to the churches!" Yeah, he thought he was so clever that he could write a poem which could insult like really important people without then getting quite in a lot of trouble, and it didn't work. But he's cool, and the thing that drew me to him, I guess, was his improv. Was the fact that he wrote these essentially rap battles with
Yeah.
with Scottish people, and the Scottish people were pretty rude back.
He sounds like an amazing I mean, is that I don't know enough about the history of improv, and it might be a bit unfair to expect you to as well. But is that the kind of earliest form of improv that you're kind of aware of, or
No. So you have in classical poetry, there's
yes?
a tradition of oration and being able to extemporize. the like improvised basically poetry, etc., you believe that you got like spirits or like higher inspiration, spirare, like spirits, like all these kind of like through breathing you are getting a higher power to come through you, um,
Mm-hmm.
and improvise things on the spot. And you'd have a word hoard in your mind, which was like all these words which in the medieval times, if you see pictures of brains, you have something at the front of your brain called fancy, which is the thing that takes words from the back of your brain and throws them to the front of your brain. And it's kind of like an impish kind of thing which you don't have any control over, which
Mm.
helps poets when they're improvising kind of like come up with rhymes and what they're about to say. But it means in the medieval period, you get a lot of religious people going, well, this is the devil's work because fancy is the devil. And
Yeah.
actually, people who improvise aren't in control of what they're saying, and it allows the devil to kind of hijack what you're saying. So it's a
Oh my
really
God.
true. And so Skelton goes, no, this is rubbish. I actually think it's me doing this, not the devil. But a lot of people got very upset about it.
Wow. And obviously, over time, those people have been proved right. We do know now
That
through
it's the
science that the devil lives inside every improviser.
yeah, it
Uh,
is.
do you think Skelton would enjoy kind of seeing Christian and Eaton improvising and kind of improvised raps and music?
He
Do you
would
think
demand.
that would be exciting for him?
I think he would find it exciting if he won.
But otherwise,
Uh,
yeah.
he would
If he's
declare.
not at the center
Declare
of
it.
attention, then he's not that fast.
I think if it was a competition, which it would be because he'd insist it were, uh, then he would, if he won, say that it was the highest form of art, and condone Skelton Poet Laureate. So and he would declare the whole thing completely null and void, take, throw everything at the table, and storm out.
He is he someone that you kind of, I mean, obviously he sounds like a total kook. I mean, a real kind of live wire, self-involved, lots of things that probably aren't actual admirable qualities. But is he someone that you admire for the way that he wrote, and is it something that you kind of thought about when you were improvising and when you are improvising?
I really admire him. I do. I think he's intelligent, and he has a personality to his poetry, which is, for me, lacking in a lot of courtly poetry at the time. I think there were a lot of conventions which a lot of people were following, because you have a lot of essentially rich blokes in court writing about love.
Hmm.
And Skelton's like, no, not about it. He's going to write about, Eleanor Rumming, who's some like kooky beers chugging woman in a pub. Like, he's cool. His topics are cool, and he inspired me to try out different kinds of verse forms in my own work. Back when I wrote poetry, what a dark period of my life. And he inspired me to write an entire dissertation on improv. Like,
Oh wow.
yeah,
I suspect he's the kind of person who would very much like to be told how he inspired you to do all these brilliant things.
I hate it. I can never tell him because he's dead.
But if we get him back for this party, just don't mention it to him or you won't hear the end of it for the rest of the dinner. Well, a great choice for a second guest. Certainly a fascinating person. Your next guest is well on their way, I think, to kind of securing national treasure territory. She's someone super fascinating, another gifted improviser, a cracking choice for any dinner party guest. You're inviting Sue Perkins.
My future lady wife, Sue Perkins. Yes.
When I was reading about her earlier, it sounded to me like her experience of comedy was similar to what you talked about with your experience of the imps, where you kind of discovered this whole different thing of being funny on the spot. And she talks about the sense of freedom that she discovered through improv and comedy when she was in the Cambridge Footlights. When did you first become a fan of Sue Perkins?
The first time I ever caught eyes with no, I must admit, I put Sue Perkins on this list because I'm really in love with her. And it's going to be weird now. If I ever get as successful as I really hope I will be one day, there will be a point that I will be able to talk to Sue Perkins, and at that point, I think I'll have to say I've peaked. Um, but she really just is. I think I saw her growing up as a bit of an icon because she was openly queer,
Yeah.
funny, and she didn't need to do the thing of like being blokey so she could like do comedy. I think
Yep.
there's this thing that either you've got to be like the pretty girl who's like the manic pixie dream girl of comedy, or you've got to like be a bloke in comedy,
Mhm.
even, you know, and like hide the fact you're a lady. And I think Sue Perkins was just openly a lesbian, and I loved that. She was my Ring of Keys moment, if anyone likes Fun Home. Um, and yeah, I watched her on some, I don't know, panel shows or something, and then I went down a bit of a, you know, when you just get a bit obsessed with someone and you just watch everything they've ever made.
Yes.
Heading Out, which is her sitcom from, I think it was 2013 or something, and
Right.
it's very thinly veiled. Like it's basically Sue Perkins doing Sue Perkins. Um, Sarah, she's a vet. She has to tell her parents that she's gay, and that's it basically.
Right, right. Her kind of her coming out story to her parents is absolutely terrific. I'm not sure. I mean, you probably do know it, uh, but it's absolutely wonderful. I heard it on her Desert Island Discs episode where she sort of felt she needed to do the grand coming out thing, so she called her mum and said, "Can I come home and just have a cup of tea and have a chat with you and Dad tomorrow?" And her mum was like, "Well, why do you want to come home?" And she's like, "No, I just it would be good to kind of sit down and chat with you." And her mum apparently said to her, "Is it because you're gay?" And she was like, "Oh, yeah, I suppose, yeah."
You know, that's another reason why we get on really well and why Sue Perkins should be my future lady wife is because is it weird? Is it getting weird? I don't know. Is she's still at the level of celebrity where I think it's okay? Maybe I don't know. I also, when coming out to my mum, I remember making out with a girl in a music room, like practice room
Hmm.
at school, and I'm not going to say her name, but you know, girl paused. Oh, girl, oh my god. She paused. And she was like, "Oh my god, but like, do your parents know you out to you out to your parents? Like, I could never do that." And I was like, I don't know. Let me check. So I went home that night. Went, mum, have I come out to you yet? And she's like, I don't know, no. And I was like, right, okay, I have something to tell you. And she was like, I do know. And I was like, okay, great, good. Party is there. Stole my thunder.
Well, there we go. There's some common ground between you and Sue.
Right, we have
Um,
something to talk about.
and her dynamic with Mel as part of their double act, it's kind of something else that made me think of you because obviously that level of to use. I remember about three things from my performing arts degree, and one of them is the French word complicité, which
Mm.
always makes me sound like I know more than what I actually know. But that idea, that kind of instinctual, just getting each other and just almost being able to read the other person's mind and go with the idea before it's even been uttered, and that's so obvious with her and Mel, and it's something that I think is it something that kind of is inspiring to you as performer with a comedy partner like Sue has?
I think 100%. I think people often go like, um, certainly with me and Ed, when we improvise, I imagine similar things leveled with a lot of comedy partners. They'll be like, oh, you know each other so well that you know what each other's going to say before they say it, or like you go with it before you know, like, da da da. I'd say it's it's much more simple than that. Often when it looks like reading what I'm reading Ed's mind, or Ed's reading my mind, or we've planned something beforehand and we haven't planned it. All it is,
Hmm.
you trust that person entirely, implicitly, and completely, and you
Hmm.
say yes to the idea before you know what it is, because you know it's going to be brilliant. And you know
Yeah.
it's not brilliant, you'll make it brilliant together within a few seconds of it happening. And it's why I never worry about going on stage with him. It's why I never worry about the fact that we never, we improvise entire musicals. It's because I know that whatever he does, I'm going to think it's hilarious and it's going to be something which we can make together. So it often looks
Yeah.
like reading, and what it really is just blind faith.
That's a very good quality to have in a comedy partner. With Sue, you've got her there at your dinner party.
Mm.
Is there a particular aspect of her career, or her personal experience or anything that you want to pick her mind about, or do you just want to kind of bask in her presence there?
I think I'd find it really hard to get more than a few words out at first. As I said before, I do actually get quite tongue tied a lot for an improviser, which is
There are
uh,
better qualities in improvisers,
oh,
I'll admit.
if anyone is ever struggling with speaking in public, no, it can get better if you just keep doing it relentlessly. Um, I think what would I probably ask if I could ask her anything? I'd want to know what it feels like to do a creative job long term, which is so tied into your own personal brand and your own personal identity. I think
Mm,
one of the things that's been interesting about the way that my writing's gone so far is that it's moved further and further away from me as a person. Um, Christian Adore is a male caricature of me, versus the first show I ever wrote was something called Oddball, which was at the Southern Playhouse, and that was very much it's me, like the
mm, mhm.
very uninventively just me, like um, and my feelings and my thoughts ventriloquized through someone who looks incredibly like me and is basically versus now I'm writing projects for people who, I'm working on a horror movie at the moment for someone that's not even vaguely my idea. I'm just writing on it, but I've got to write the dialogue for it. Do you know what I mean? And so it's not
Yeah, yeah.
Sue is like, she's Sue Perkins, and anything she ever does, every QI she does, every whatever, it's Sue Perkins does this thing, and just want
Yeah.
what effect that has on her relationships and her sense of self and who she is when she's brushing her teeth and when she can turn
Yeah,
on.
yeah.
Because I know that certainly for me, like even something as simple as when I was in Oxford and like going to a club and knowing that there were people who would know my drag personality more than they'd know me, and then might when you end up, if you were to hook up or even just talk as friends or whatever, there's always like different levels of intimacy at the start of it,
Mhm.
like expectations of when you're on or when you're funny or when you're not funny. I don't know.
Yeah, I think that's a great question for her. I think she would be such a fascinating person to speak to. A really, really brilliant choice for a third guest. Your fourth guest is a trailblazer. I mean, someone who, again, to my shame, I didn't really know much about until now. She's someone who was quoted as saying that she led a life dedicated to pleasure and poetry, which
Yes.
already makes her an outstanding dinner party guest. You're inviting the fascinating Afra Ben.
Yes. I've gone back to history. Look, I gave you a modern one. I gave you Sue Perkins. We're going back. Going back to, I'd say 1670s was when she was in her kind of heyday, I'd say.
Right. Yeah.
She was, uh, well, I'd say the trailblazer of females in theatre. She's a writer. She was a spy, which not many people know. Uh,
Yes.
King Charles II. Her code name was Asta, uh, and she thought she was going to be a nun for a bit.
God. I mean, what a fascinating life to think you're going to be a nun, end up being a spy, and then
But the thing
one of the most influential writers in kind of in British literary and theatrical history.
is,
When did you first become aware of Afra Ben?
at uni, I found her because I didn't want to write about men. And
Brilliant.
I'd written
That's
more about men.
well, absolutely, and she really is. She maybe not the first, but certainly one of the most prominent women to make a career, or one of the first women to make a career from her writing.
So this is the thing, right? Afra Ben has the hustle. Like she was a spy, right? She goes to Antwerp. She has to like try and make this guy Scott like turn into a double agent, whatever. She's not mad successful at it. We don't know that much, obviously. From what I can ascertain, and historians might say I'm wrong, she wasn't great, and
Yeah.
she comes home. I think it's because she was too sassy. I think we'd get on fine because actually I'd be because I'd be like, second someone annoyed me, I'd just be like, right, well, hold on, and then blow my cover. Anyway, Antwerp doesn't go so well. She comes back, and it turns out being a spy is not actually as lucrative as one might imagine it is. James Bond always seems pretty flush.
Yeah, yeah.
Comes home absolutely destitute. And she goes, gosh, I really am going to be thrown into the debtors' prison any second now. I can't eat, I can't do anything. I know what I'll do. I'll go to that really stable career and be a writer. I'll be a freelance writer. And
That'll keep me out of
that'll
debtor's
keep me
jail.
out. It's very logical and reasonable, I think. And
You can tell she wasn't doing this in 2020, where the opposite, of course, is true.
well, yeah, yeah, essentially, at the time, context-wise, theatres were just coming back, so they're in a time when theatres are very, very commercially driven, much in the same way that I was talking about, with COVID. Maybe what will start happening when theatres start opening now, actually. Theatre takes a turn for the commercial because they need to stay open and they need money, and so what
Yeah.
they put on the most popular things. So anything we went from, really, really puritanical values to now let's go for scandal. Anything's possible, guys. As long as it's got a bit of sex, a bit of board, and there's some ladies flashing some skirts, really well. Um, plus, women were for the first time ever allowed on a stage. So this is no longer Shakespeare's Britain. This is no longer all boys playing women. This is women on stage as women, and they got really criticised for it a lot and called sex workers essentially. Um,
Mhm.
but Afra Ben goes, no, thank you very much. She doesn't hide under pseudonyms for her entire career, and she outright tackles critics in her prefaces to her plays. She'll, be like, "No, actually, lads, I'm not a bad writer. You wouldn't criticize men for doing this.
Mhm.
And if women are worse, in your opinion, than men, it's only because they haven't been educated properly, not for their lack of ability." And that just, to me, she's so ahead of her time.
Yeah, that's incredible. You mentioned earlier that historians might disagree with some of the things you say about her, but actually, everything I read about her, every sentence all of them kind of started like, she may have done this, or it's possible that this was the case. Um, I read one description of her that said she had a lethal combination of obscurity, secrecy, and staginess, which makes her an uneasy fit for any narrative, speculative or factual. Do you
Yes.
think that element of kind of mystique about her adds a little bit of drama and excitement to your dinner party?
I think it really does. I think I see a lot of myself in this character that I've kind of created from what I've read of her.
Yeah.
I think that's what, like. I think part of the reason why I'm so attracted to people from history is because you can kind of create these personalities. Like they don't need to be real. Like I don't know the real Afra Ben because no one did, but
Yeah, yeah.
she writes a lot of characters um, who are this way as well, which is perhaps where the quote came from. This really strange mix of someone who is incredibly stagey, incredibly theatrical. You look at something like The Rover. You have these characters who, like Florinda and Helena, they dress up. They want to impress the men. They're a bit bawdy. They'll lie and they'll cheat and they'll do what they need to do to get their way. But there are always bits of them that they kind of keep to themselves. And in the same way that, like, I'd ask Sue Perkins how being Sue Perkins TM affects her life, who she is when she's alone brushing her teeth, I'd say Afra Ben had that balance kind of nailed. She knew who she was in the public eye. She had this kind of, I'm a badass femme on 4 hours,
Yeah.
like, rinse you if you say any different. But she
Yeah.
kept her private life.
Yeah. God, it's such a fine balance. And particularly, as you mentioned earlier, when she was so under attack from sections of the press at the time, simply because she was a woman, and, trying to operate and make a name for herself in what was a very male dominated space. I mean, obviously, there's a great deal of, I guess, commonality between her interest in gender and obviously so much of what you do looks at gender. And do you think that would be a kind of a rich vein of conversation for you guys to tap into?
Massively. I mean, The Rover has women dressing up as men so that they can flirt with men and get their way.
Oh,
Like,
wow, I didn't know that.
yeah, it's really cool. It's like, the first time I read it, I was like, damn. It's also got a sex worker in it. I believe she's called Angelica. I can't remember. I read this a long time ago. Who she's like, so men like can't afford her. And
Right.
like, okay, yeah, like move along. And then she's like, oh, screw this, I need more clients. So she goes out and finds herself some clients and like, basically tells them what they're gonna do and how they're gonna pay her, and then she sorts it out and then doesn't end up having to sleep with them. And it's like, it's just, I don't know. She has two characters who feel very modern. Her approach to gender is very modern, and she was a libertine. So like, this is someone who was one of the most prolific playwrights of her period, who's not written about enough because guess what? Patriarchy. She she was mates with people like the Earl of Rochester, who was a libertine who wrote a lot about, sex and stuff. She wrote
Yeah.
poems like about male impotence. Um like the disappointment is about a guy who can't get it up. And there's this really sassy line at the end that's like, "Oh, the nymph's resentments, none but I can well imagine." Like, when a man can't get it up, and she does really well because she's just like, I want to know what that was like to write a poem about male impotency in that period, and just
Yeah.
people responded to her when she walked into a room.
Yeah, I mean, she sounds like someone you wouldn't want to mess with, like confident in who she is and how she should be perceived.
Yeah,
Uh, she sounds absolutely fierce. I think she sounds brilliant.
yeah, she's an icon.
Uh, and also, one thing that I did see about her earlier was that she's buried at Westminster Abbey, which is now your second guest with a connection to Westminster Abbey. Because, of course, our good friend John Skelton sought sanctuary there. I don't know if it's a coincidence or if you just really like Westminster Abbey.
I do.
Who
I'm not.
knows?
I'm a Jew who loves Westminster Abbey. I want what I can't have.
Well, Jessica, your final guest. I think this person is next level. They were a British peer dubbed the Dancing Marquis.
Mhm.
They're said to have lived a life of pure hedonism.
Yes.
You're inviting someone who's kind of lavish and extravagant dress sense, might even put Eton Mess to shame. You're inviting the fifth Marquis of Anglesey, Henry Paget.
Henry Paget. He is icon, legend, and star. Henry Paget. He was a massive inspiration for my drag. That's why I kind of popped him on the list.
Yeah.
He is the kind of man who, if you will, wanted a green jacket to play table tennis in. And so commissioned himself a jacket made entirely of emeralds. Um, he
It's
started
mad.
really, really, really as one of the like richest people in the country, and he died destitute. And he died destitute because he dedicated his life to theatre. Very much the opposite of Afro Ben. Didn't really understand how to make any money from it, and
Yeah.
is very much, I believe, how Christian Adore would act if he had a load of money, which is essentially, I'm going to dedicate my life to beauty. And someone goes, really? Do you need an entire jacket made of diamonds? Yes, for beauty.
When I was reading about him, my first impressions were that he sounded kind of superficial, reckless, and
Yeah,
vain.
yes.
But the more I read about him, the more I just thought, you do you, Henry, because this is amazing. He sounds as well like he'd be a proper party animal.
He would, like, he'd bring the funk. Like, he he'd buy all the drinks, so I wouldn't need to pay. Uh,
Yes.
Even if that made him even more cripplingly in debt than he already is. Definitely treat us to a song or something. He'd probably have commissioned a small theatre troupe to do something. Um,
Yeah. Yeah,
and
definitely.
he'd make the room look lovely. He'd probably turn up early and make it look really lavish. There'd probably be peacocks walking around. I just want to know what it is like to have his confidence in
Yeah.
what is.
And this is someone else as well who doesn't kind of fit the prescribed sort of traditional gender model assigned at birth. Like he wore these lavish outfits, these kind of beautiful diamond headdresses, as you said, jackets made of emeralds.
He's a crossdresser, self-identifying as a crossdresser. I know that that term is now, you know,
Yeah.
people don't like it. But at the time, we're talking 1870. I can't remember. 18? No,
Yeah, around that he died in the early 1900s,
yeah.
so maybe kind of 1880s, 1890s. Yeah.
Um, he was notoriously the most. What was it? Like the notoriously the most scandalous homosexual in the period.
The playwright who wrote a musical about his life a few years ago.
Well, Cyril Davies, yeah.
Ah, okay, great. I did think that you'd probably seen the show. But your friend suggested that this is not just an attempt to kind of scrub him from history, but it's also a part of kind of erasing queer history. What's your take on that?
I think that he. Well, I'm always tempted with Henry to say they, only because I feel as someone who like I definitely identify as genderqueer. I think he is to me part of that pantheon, part of that
Yeah.
tradition. You know, pioneering like what it means to question why a man or someone who was born a man can't wear beautiful, beautiful dresses and be effeminate and
Hmm.
emote strongly. And I think just at the time, that's just not something which people were ready for. And it's tragic. I think, yeah, Serial is completely right. They scrub his name from history because they don't want anything to do with that kind of effeminate. And
Hmm.
also this dedicating his life to theatre, this the whims that he went on, and the way he lived his life was not particularly rational or good. Like, let's be really objective here. I love the man. I love everything that he stands for, and yet, like, lol, he died penniless because he
Yeah.
bought himself too many diamonds. Like,
It was yeah. I think that the thing when because nothing sort of definitive in any articles or history or anything could say that he ever had a sexual encounter with another male. So
um,
perhaps not kind of not openly gay or anything, but this was someone who bought a car and converted the exhaust fumes into rose scented perfume and had, and I quote, a fleet of poodles.
yes.
If a person with a fleet of poodles isn't a gay man, then I simply don't know.
Oh, this is the thing. assume because genuinely, uh, my drag character Christian Adore, he's
Yeah.
necessarily gay. He's bisexual. He likes anyone who he comes into contact with. He's probably going to fall in love with at some point. I don't want to read homosexuality onto someone who could have been, trans before they knew what trans was, or
Yeah, yeah.
really loved beauty. But for whatever reason, I think that the way that Henry Paget like expresses his selfness, it's queering culture, it's queering life, it's queering the way you do life. So
Yeah, yeah. He was, I mean, he was genuinely fabulous. He was said to have influenced the kind of the style of Freddie Mercury as well, which I think you can see. You said he was kind of an influence on your drag character. Was Freddie Mercury perhaps another influence, or?
massively, yeah, I think the nose is a big thing for me. I think I was made fun of quite a lot at school for my nose, which is, if anyone sees a photo of me, just a bit Jewish. Um, uh, yeah, I think definitely that kind of proud, strong jawline and the elaborateness of the way that they kind of express
Hmm.
was an inspiration. And definitely, my mom was a massive Queen fan when I was younger. Freddie
Ah.
Mercury very nearly made it onto this list. I like know all the albums off by heart
Oh
and
wow.
used to mouth along to all of them, slash sing very loudly to all of them.
Well, what do you think you would want to say to Henry at your dinner party? I mean, would you want to thank him for anything, or just like hear his mad stories, or?
I think I'd want to like. Oh God, this is getting so sappy now. Wow. I think I'd probably want to thank him and say that whilst in life he was not potentially the most successful person, he's changed my life and he's changed, I hope, hundreds and hundreds of other people's lives because, well, Serial's music, by the way, the musical about Henry Paget's life is called How to Win Against History. I urge you, go listen to it on Spotify, go look it up, find any bootlegs you can possibly find, although I think there aren't any on the internet for public consumption. Uh,
Good.
good, exactly.
Well,
Uh,
we'll add a link to the Spotify album in the episode description so people can listen to the album.
it's a marvelous musical and it looks at what it means to kind of be someone who doesn't fit into traditional gender roles in a society which is entirely built on them. And so I'd probably say thank you and to keep doing you, son.
What I really love about all of your guest choices, and something I also just truly admire about you from having spoken to you, uh, all six people at this dinner table are so confident in who they are and what they are, and seemingly very happy with who they are. And I think that that is not an easy place for anybody to get to. And to have such an inspiring group of six people there who are all very cool and do that, I think that's a pretty special group of people to gather together.
Thank you. I think, life's short and you don't have time. I spent too much of my like being a teenager, like, hey, like trying to avoid stuff like the bits of you that you don't like or whatever. And
Hmm.
then kind of at uni, I was just really lucky at uni that just I found a group of people who celebrated literally everything that it means to be a bit weird. Uh,
Hmm.
and yeah, and now I look up to people who are a bit weird.
Oh, thank God for the weirdos. I like to think that I'm amongst the weirdos as well, or at the very least, I try to be.
You're definitely amongst the widows, and you're great.
Thank you so much. So, Cheska, we know that we are all at the Royal Albert Hall. We've got you, Eton Mess, John Skelton, Sue Perkins, Afra Ben, and the amazing Henry Paget. The only thing left to find out about this amazing dinner party is what you're going to cook for everyone. I'm assuming not chicken nuggets.
Well, no. Now, To anyone who knows me, I'm not the best chef. I'm really not. I would say, harkening back to things we talked about before, I've had a long old journey with food and I'm still not great with it. And one
Yeah.
of the things that has emerged is that my patience for cooking food is generally, if it takes longer than about 5 minutes to make, uh, there's just too much room for a whole host of kind of doubts, like machinations that go on in my brain. Like generally
Yeah, yeah.
tend to crop up and occur. So I tend to make things which involve as little effort as physically possible. I also know that I have eaten mess on the dinner on the guest list,
Yes.
and so this is really just entirely in honor of her. This meal. I also know that most of the people in my guest list are historical figures, and so will therefore be in awe of whatever I show them. So and Sue Perkins is a massive foodie, so she won't care. Um, the starter is salt and vinegar crisps because
Yes.
it's a mess. Um, can eat two family-sized bags of them before a show without batting an eyelid, and frequently does. Anyway, then the kind of I'd say like the pre-main course. What do you call it? The bit between
Oh.
maybe we'll
Do you mean like the kind of palate cleanser type thing, or?
call it a palate cleanser. Would be chicken katsu curry
Oh yes.
for me and Sue Perkins because we're both vegetarian or vegan. The main course would be Domino's because yeah, Eton Mess will die destitute and poor on the fact that she spends all of her money on takeaway. Um, and we used to live next to a Domino's when I lived in Oxford, and
Oh
so
God, that's
would
very dangerous.
before every time we'd have a gig or we'd go out, we'd go back to mine, we'd get into drag, Eton would order a family sized pizza, eat the entire pizza, and then the dessert would be Eton mess.
Hey,
But with a
that
vegan for me and Sue, so you know.
that is an extraordinary meal. I mean, any meal where you're getting katsu
Chicken.
curry before your pizza, I'm in. I will happily be in the kitchen, just sort of sneaking the leftovers on people's plates.
I mean, look, there's going to be not many leftovers because we've got Eton Mess in the room. Again, he's a starving artist and spy. We've got John Skelton, who I just have a feeling has a big appetite. Sue Perkins has proved on Bake Off that she has a hollow stomach.
Yes,
Really,
true.
of Anglesey is too rich to eat, but he would,
I'm sure there'd be some champagne going down
yeah, he's
there.
just in a corner, I think. So,
That sounds absolutely perfect. How does the evening sound to you? Kind of all summed up. Royal Albert Hall, that delicious meal, that incredible group of people. Does that really sound like your kind of dream dinner party?
it really does actually. I wish
It
I
would
could.
be a pretty amazing night. Uh, Cheska, thank you so much for sharing that with me. I really enjoyed that. Before I let you go, if people want to hear more of your brilliant work, see more of your brilliant work, um, are you on social media? Can we visit your website?
If you want to catch me on the socials, Twitter is at Forristal Writes, as in the verb. So Forristal, my last name, Forristal, Writes. And I'm the same on Instagram. If you want to follow Dragprov, it's at Dragprov Improv.
Haha, fantastic. Well, we will add links to your website, to your Twitter, to Dragprov. And I cannot wait until audiences are allowed back in front of performers again, hopefully very soon. And I get to see you back where you love being on stage, whether it's you, whether it's Christian, I just hope it happens very soon. Francesca, thank you so much for sharing that dinner party, and I'll hopefully speak to you again soon.
Absolute joy. Thank you so much.
Cheers. Bye.
Bye.
So that was the dream dinner party of the supremely talented Francesca Forristal. Such a great collection of guests there. As I said to Cheska, I think the overall sense of confidence and identity with all those people is something so inspiring, and I really firmly include Cheska in that number two. Make sure you check out Cheska's website, her musical work, and of course the Drag Prov review. Links to all of those are in the episode description. I can't even begin to tell you how much I'm enjoying making this podcast. I really hope you're getting a fraction of the pleasure that I get out of it. If you're having fun with it, please tell your friends, post about it, share it, subscribe, rate, etc. All those things really help us reach a wider audience. And I'd love for as many people as possible to hear from more fascinating people like Jessica and all the other brilliant guests I've had on the podcast. If you want to hear any more from me, you can check out the Jericho Comedy Podcast, which is released every Monday, or visit www.connormcreynolds.com for more of my radio, podcast, writing, and comedy work. I'll be back next week with another brilliant guest chatting all about their dream dinner party. But until then, thanks so much for listening, and bye-bye.